With Lizzie and Marvin. Later, we're asking if teachers should get a 10% rise. Now I want your calls on whether the Church of England should pay £1 billion to apologise for profiting from the slave trade. 0207 862 2222 is the number. Tell us what you think. The Church is set to create a £1 billion fund after an independent report claimed its previous pledge of £100 million was insufficient to make up for the moral sin of slavery. Church money men hope wealthy donors will stump up the extra cash, which will benefit black communities. The fund is intended to help with healing, repair and justice after the church discovered a chunk of its wealth originated from the slave trade. Some vicars, though, have called the move a death wish and claimed it could stop people donating to their local church in the present day. So let's just have a look at the connection and why this has got the church all tangled up. We have to go back. Let's run the film here. We have to go back a long way to understand Queen Anne's bounty. 1704, and there's Queen Anne, all right? And played, of course, by Olivia Colman in the recent film. And we know about Queen Anne. She had gout, 17 pregnancies, was extremely large, and had watery eyes. Those are the four things we know about Queen Anne. But also, she established Queen Anne's bounty. And this was essentially a massive investment fund. And they started to zero in the fact that so many vicars were poor, unable to heat their homes. Vicars begging for food at banquets. Some vicars were almost beggars. So when they put the article of Constitution together for the bounty of Queen Anne, they said it would be for the augmentation of the maintenance of the poor clergy. So to help vicars. So far, so good. Nothing to see here. Here's the problem. £724 million at today's prices went into the South Sea Company. Zoom in on the South Sea Company and you'll see exactly what the problem is. It trafficked in slaves, at least 34,000, in and out of the Caribbean, all working under duress in chains. And the problem is that money, that investment, was then funneled through to the church over the centuries, even to the point where at the end of the Second World War, it was brought into something called the Church Commissioners. So the money's still basically sitting there under the control of the Church of England. And Marvin, I don't know what you think about that.
I think you do. I think it's really important that this is like a really good opportunity for the Church of England to engage in what we call restorative justice. But, you know, I welcome the money, and I think £1 billion is an appropriate sum based on there being a value of 10.3 billion in the coffers. What I would think is more important is that restorative justice needs to happen at multiple layers, and it needs to then happen over an extended period of time to usher in the change from the things that they've benefited from. And I think that becomes the most important part. Don't just give money, because how do you distribute that money and who does it go to?
Should they choose how they distribute it? Or
I think it needs to go to an independent commission of people from the black community who would understand the needs of the black community specifically and really try and develop programs and give spaces, because I think they own a lot of land and property. I think that would be a fantastic use and a way to kind of give back to the community, to give spaces where they can actually, you know, devise a new strategy for themselves. So,
Lizzie, what do you think of that?
Look, I think we've got to learn from history, the wrongdoings, but I think, is this actually fair on those that are actually going to continue to give to the church if they're seeing that this is happening? I mean, look, the church can afford it. They're valued over £10.1 billion.
I don't know if that's in cash. That's the thing. I never know what they got. It's all the value of their cathedral.
You know, we should never forget what happened in the past. And of course, as I said, they can afford it. But should they be doing it? When does this end?
When you pay, that's when it ends.
But how much is ever enough?
We just set the amount at £1 billion.
But the church said 100 million, which they thought was a massive amount of money.
Which is absurdly
low. Sooner did they put the money figure out there, then we'll say it's got to be 10 times higher.
Well, they put 723 million into a company. So to give back 100 million is an absurd notion. And again, I don't think you can be able to set their own amount of money that they're willing to give out. It should be set independently based on the finances and how much they've benefited from the slave trade. And this is a great chance for them to actually be leaders in some morality in this country. It'd be great to have it just be done and sorted without all the toing and froing.
Let's go to a call. Yvonne in London, what do you think of this?
Good morning, Jeremy.
Hey.
I met you before many years ago. My country, my music.
Oh, right.
Don't you remember that?
Okay, were you in the studio here?
No.
Okay.
I would like to say where you were.
All right.
Where we met up. Okay. So I have a question.
Yes.
with regards to this.
Yes.
And the question is, how many billions of pounds has various governments, British governments, paid out over the centuries to wealthy descendants of the slave masters from the 1830s right up to 2015? Yes, 2015, taxpayers like yourself and everybody else were paying that money out because the slave owners then, back in the 1830s, refused or they didn't want to give up the slaves until the British government paid them compensation for the loss of their property.
Yeah, buy their freedom.
For the loss of their property.
Yes.
Yeah?
So, but what's the relevance of that?
Why? Please, can I finish? Please, can I finish?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Yeah. So why is it that we, the descendants of those people who went through a horrific and vile trade, if I read a book and I couldn't read any further of what happened to our ancestors, so why are we not allowed to get anything? All they left with the Church of England, they left churches and the Bible, yes? And they told them God will provide. So
I don't understand, Yvonne.
The Caribbean is in a right state at the moment.
Yeah.
That money should go. I went to Jamaica last year, a few months ago, and children there, there are not enough schools. There are not enough schools. Children were going to schools half day.
I understand. So you want the church to pay $1 billion, do you, Yvonne?
Pardon?
You want the church to pay $1 billion?
Not just the church. I want all those wealthy people sitting in their mansions to earn that money to 2015.
Understood. Thank you, Yvonne. Yeah, because there's an ex-BBC person, lovely woman called Laura Trevelyan, who's decided that because some family money came from the slave trade, she decided to pay over 100 grand or something. So maybe there is a thought there. Dean in Birmingham, hi. Does the church owe this money?
Absolutely not.
Well, tell Marvin, because he disagrees.
Yeah, why, sir?
Well, we're the ones that abolished the slave trade. We were only involved in it for 200 years at the very least. Why are we not chasing the Romans for our compensation, or the Arab nations, or the Spanish, or the Portuguese, or the Dutch, who were the main people in the slave trade?
Chase the Dutch.
Because we do have direct links to the descendants of slavery up until present day. The actual impact, as the lady in beforehand, in terms of the financial ramifications, have continued all the way up until present day. The countries which were looted as a part of Britain's colonial voyages are still impacted negatively as a result. So we're actually still living with the consequences of that inequality and those acts. So the ask of, and again, this is not even a huge amount of the GDP. I think the church are paying quite a high amount because they invested quite a high amount into this particular program of transatlantic slavery. So it does make sense. It adds
Dean,
up
what do you think?
Financially.
Right, I agree with you on the part of the church. Now, they're just a money-making machine on their own. But blaming Britain solely for pretty much the whole.
Well,
we're
on the church here, Dean. Remember, today's about the church, right? Because the church is being told it owes $1 billion. But you don't. You think it'll stop old ladies giving money?
They will stop old ladies giving to the church.
What's this old ladies narrative? What is that?
No, but I'm not saying old ladies. Jeremy said old ladies.
But
Jeremy said old ladies.
When you go into a rural church with 10 people on a Sunday, most of them are old ladies.
And my mother is one who lives in a rural area.
In the conversation.
Because they live longer.
My mum, who is 89, I hope you don't mind me saying, Mother, how old you are.
Shouts to your mum.
But who go 89, my mother
How much?
is 89. She's fine fettle, out every night. She'd be going to Tony Hadley's concert tonight. But she, as she was saying when I spoke about this with her, it would stop her and the congregation paying into the church.
It doesn't even scratch the surface. When you're talking about £1 billion, the donations,
they're not putting it into
the donations of 10 little old ladies in a regional part of town does not equate to the magnitude of the money and what it was actually doing.
There's a lot to say here. Dean, thank you for your call, sir. Thanks, Yvonne. Nice to speak to you again. Lizzie and Marvin are with us this morning. Later we'll be asking if teachers deserve a 10% pay rise. Meanwhile, we must take more calls on the church. The Church of England is saying, right, we did a bad thing. We took money from slavery via Queen Anne's bounty, which we discussed. They are saying they're going to give 100 million. I think they were expecting a slap on the back, and the answer's come back, no. You're not even at the races with 100 million. It needs to be 1 billion. Christopher in Kent, would you put it up to $1 billion?
Oh, good morning, everybody. No, actually, I don't believe in this thing of trying to rectify all the historic wrongs that have done, that go way back into the past, that are beyond living memory. In fact, in terms of the Caribbean, there's actually 6 sort of key programs that the UK government is involved in, which involves, a lot of aid, which includes the UK, the Caribbean Infrastructure Fund, economic development, renewable energy, and also fighting criminal gangs, organised crime.
Yeah, but that's not the church. I mean, I suppose the argument, the church might say it's got to repair its own roofs before it can give money
I think
away.
the trouble is none of this is in living memory. I mean, how far back do you go? And let's take Germany, for example. Does anybody ask for them to pay reparations for the damage they did, particularly to Poland? So, I mean, you could go on and on and on. No. And the fact is,
they do. I mean, the Germans have had to pay a lot of money.
And they've actually apologised formally.
Apologies are cheap.
Forgiveness. What about forgiveness? That's a good point.
After reparations, yes.
I mean, but what about forgiveness? And I agree with Christopher. I mean, throughout history, there have been so many wrongdoings.
But isn't that the business of those countries?
History.
No. That's the
mistakes.
business of those particular countries. And if those countries want to ask for reparations from Germany, for example, that's their business. The actual request has formally come in from many of these nations, not only to the UK government, but also now to the UK churches, the Church of England, to repair. And as I said, repair is multi-layered. It's not just about money. So those programs that you mentioned that the government are involved in, being involved in programs is completely different to atoning the request that has actually been sent to you. You can't fob us off with sort of partial programs about.
But I would have thought that being involved with programs was better than just posting money.
Can we just get our money back? The thing is,
are you going to stop
what
about the ordinary churchgoer that's going today?
You keep talking about the ordinary churchgoer to try and create
a little old lady.
The church is an institution. The institution is responsible. There's no point creating visuals of like individual people that are hard up that need the church to do something.
But
they have benefited. They have
directly funding
massively
their own parishes.
to the tune of over $1 billion, and so our giving back $1 billion is nothing in comparison to what they've done.
That's the problem.
Pause there. Thank you, Christopher. Anne in Birmingham, what do you think? Should the church pay? What?
My name has been Sue.
How are you, Anne?
Hi, Anne.
Anne.
Hello.
Anne, you're on.
Hello.
Hello.
The slavery, I don't think it should be down to just the church to pay back.
Well, we're just talking about the church today, Anne. That's kind of where we're at as a programme.
With the payment from the church back to slavery, I don't think it should be down to just the church. I think there's a lot of genuine normal people around Britain whose ancestors owned slaves. They should put back too, as well as the Crown and as well as the government, because it was the Crown that started this in the first place, and we can't just put it down to the church to pay back.
This is about the church. This is about the church paying their particular part back.
Yeah.
But you introduced really a good point of the UK government also has a massive role to play.
Well, no, she's talking about individuals.
Well, but individuals through the government, it would never happen as individuals will go around and
Why not chase down people with the wrong surname and say, look, I'm sorry, mate, but your great-great-grandfather was involved.
Today?
Because Britain as a nation has benefited from it.
Great-grandfather was a murderer. Would you?
That's a very good example. Let's say my great-grandfather did stagecoach robberies, all right, and as a result of that had a massive house which I now live in, and his victims came along and said, you should pay over. I think I would feel
morally obligated.
I'd feel that my house.
Jeremy, you're a moral person, Jeremy, so it becomes a very easy conversation to have that with you. But with other people who pretend to hide the wealth and not actually be accountable, they get to shirk it.
Okay. I don't think it's fair if your grandfather's Dick Turpin that you then have to pay with your grandchildren pay. You know,
maybe not Dick Turpin.
If there is a direct link,
I'm just trying to say.
Okay, I don't want to minimise it. Carl in Buckinghamshire, hi.
Yeah. Morning, Jeremy.
Well done. What would you like to say?
I'd like to say that I concur with your former listeners phoning in, but it shouldn't be just targeted on West African and Black people heritage to get paid. What about the rest of the people that the church abused throughout the centuries? That chap Marlon. That chap Marlon. Listen, your parents came from there.
Marvin.
Sorry, mate. Your parents came from there, and they've benefited from British society.
No,
You're
they
on
haven't.
TV. You're probably, yes, they
It's
have.
a
What are you doing on
disproportionate
TV?
benefit.
You're earning 20 grand a day. You're earning 20 grand a day.
My family
on
came
Jeremy
here
Vine.
qualified and were subjected into substandard to substandard working, living and educational standards. So the idea that we benefited, we had to earn every single thing that we've ever got from this country, including myself. What I will though say to you though, which I think is super important, the repairing element which comes from other nations, everyone should make their own claim. So if you have been affected by the Church of England, make your own claim, do your own research and gather your own insights. You piggybacking off the back of the claims of those who are impacted by the slave trade is not the way to go about it.
I think Carl sounded Australian. I wonder whether he was
absolutely
his
on that
were shipped
basis.
over.
And you have a nation to represent your interests.
Yeah.
So lobby them to go and speak to the Church of England to get your repair.
Alexandra in Somerset. Hi, Alexandra.
Hi, Jeremy.
Well, we're at a 50-50 situation. You've got to tip us one way or the other. What do you think?
Well, I think absolutely not. I mean, I think the church is corrupt anyway. But I'm kind of more interested in why we're not looking at helping the countries that are still active with their slavery now. I mean, just an easy Google would tell you that the countries with the biggest slave problem are still in Africa.
Whoa.
So, you know...
What do you mean? That some African countries have got slaves?
Yeah, in today's modern society.
Do you know what countries they are?
What are you talking about here?
Okay, so just a simple Google.
That's, yeah.
Let me get it up. Says,
get it up, yeah.
Other countries with significantly high... China comes up, but there's no figures for it. So other countries with significantly high slave populations are Russia, Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, Egypt, Myanmar.
So we're on sort of modern slavery.
But just because I think this is a really important point. If you talk about, you mentioned African countries, so I'll speak to them. But the reason why that is happening in places like Nigeria and Congo is because of mineral wealth. And they're not actually being led by the countries themselves. They're being led by corporate interest. So it's a slightly different, thing that's happening there.
1 billion would be better suited to helping those people today rather than reparations, because another point that you've failed to consider is that 1.25 million European Christians were captured and forced to work in North Africa between the 16th and 18th centuries.
So what I would say is any request for a repair is always an and. It's not an or. We shouldn't necessarily prioritise one over the other. This is a particular strand of restorative justice around the transatlantic
about the church
slavery, and it's about the church specifically.
But Alexandra's got a point, looking
There's
at
a lot of it around.
and looking at today. And we can't take back what happened in the past, but we can learn from that.
No, but you can pay for it, though.
All right.
You can pay for it, Liz.
And you know what? We've got to move forward and learn from our mistakes.
After we pay for it.
Thank you to all our callers. Thanks, Alexandra. Later we'll be asking if it's okay for Kate Middleton.